I have witnessed the process of dying. So it happened to me that when I read Anita Bordiani's book, I said, wow, I've seen this. I've been there with people. I've had to accompany people at the end of life. And I've seen how the guardian angel or main guide arrives, how the relatives come. I've seen that, and that door opens, that transit channel, just like when we are born. There is a birth canal, there is also an exit channel. And when we are on the other side, we are received by our loved ones, entities from the spiritual world. And depending on the condition in which we pass, death is a state of consciousness. If you refuse to die, certain things happen. If you are emotionally or mentally unwell when you leave, other things happen.
Welcome everyone to this 11th episode of Out of the Matrix and the Invisible. Today, I must go back several years when I was giving a training in mediumship and suddenly a girl completely unknown to me at that time showed up. And this was about 8 or 9 years ago. Perhaps I lose track of time. And since then, she has dedicated herself deeply to mediumship, and today she is a consecrated medium. With her, we will address this topic and how she has become a professional medium. Rosario, thank you for being with us here.
Hello, Sebas. Thank you, Esteban, for inviting me.
My pleasure. Happy to have you here with us. Rosario, tell me, going back to this story, right? Back to when we met. What motivated you at that time to take a mediumship training?
In 2018, which was when I took the initiation into mediumship. That workshop, mediumship was happening to me. I think that many people who watch and listen to us experience things, and one wonders what to do with this. Because deep down, you don't know how to control it, right? At the beginning, mediumship can be a bit invasive if it arises naturally. But I already had previous sensitivities. In 2008, that is 10 years earlier, I began my path as a channeler, which was similar. Suddenly I started channeling and I didn't know what was happening. So I ended up taking the course in 2018, ultimately finding out what to do or how to manage mediumship without it overwhelming me and learning how to use it. So that was something that motivated me to take that workshop back then, quite a while ago.
And maybe meeting other people who were experiencing something similar is also a motivating factor.
At that moment, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how things would continue. The only thing I knew was that I had to do something. And also because I had gone to sessions with other mediums, like to get a consultation. Basically, I did, and my grandfather appeared, and my grandfather says, hey, you know what? You should dedicate yourself to this. I said, but how do I dedicate myself to this? What if it only happens to me by chance? So I had no idea what to do. And that's when I decided to take that workshop. There were several components that ultimately led me to take the workshop and decide to pursue mediumship.
And do you remember your beginnings as a medium, your first experiences?
Looking back, the very first things that happened to me occurred when I was in university. I was 20 years old, around 24. That's when it started, but I wasn't aware that what I was doing was actually connecting as a medium. In those years, when I was about 20, a schoolmate's father passed away and I went to his funeral. They were very, very upset because the father died suddenly. So they were crying. They were really in a bad state. The only thing I knew how to do was Reiki. As the only tool I had to help them at that moment was Reiki. So what I did was and help them from there. And when I started doing Reiki on them, I felt their father behind me and their father's guardian angel. At that moment, I didn't understand anything. I just knew it was their father and there was something else. And I did Reiki on them. After finishing that, this was during a transfer from their house where the response and everything happened close to their home to the cemetery. And at that moment, they managed to calm down and everything, and we arrived at the cemetery. They were able to sit down, and on the emotional turnaround they experienced was quite incredible because they calmed down a lot and remained in a state of great peace throughout the entire time. The response and everything that was done there at the cemetery. I also ended up feeling the same way. It's like you had taken, I don't know, something, and all the peace came to you at once, and they were able to be much calmer there. And so was I. So that was the first time I realized I could do that, but I thought it was just Reiki. Yes, I thought it was just that. I never realized. Many years later, I saw that it was actually in more than that. Of course, so that was like the first experience consciously aware of it.
Is that the first conscious experience you had of mediumship that you believe it was? Or rather, that you are sure it was mediumistic? No.
Yes, because I felt the Father and it was the first time, but I didn't. I noticed connections there. I mean, smaller things happened to me, but they were very strange and very short, so it was like never. But there I did realize over the years that it was the first more solid experience of my life, clearer, right? Yes.
Hey, and well, you define yourself as a medium, but also as a channeler. It would be interesting kung tumanday us understand what the difference is between mediumship and channeling. How do you see it?
Channeling is a type of connection established with the spiritual world, but with entities from the spiritual world and people's souls. So I always say that the place of connection is different. For channeling, we connect like up here, right? Like connecting with the higher spheres, we establish communication with that plane. And mediumship for me is established at a level of communication similar to ours, that is on par with ourselves. So a different frequency is used, we tune into a different frequency. And of course they play a complementary role in me because I am a medium and a channeler. That's why I was also telling you that over the years I realized that I perceived deceased individuals and entities from the spiritual world, such as, for example, the guardian angel, the main guide of people. So, although not all mediums are channelers, not all channelers are mediums either. So, that figure is interesting because even though we connect with the invisible, there are different ways of connection. And it also has a different depth.
Okay, perfect. And do you feel the connection differently? I mean, is there something like you feel an organic sensation, or is there something where you notice the difference?
Yes. Over the years, at first I didn't understand well, but over the years I managed to distinguish. I perceive the guides of people next to them. And since I do on online sessions, I perceive them to my left in front of me. On the other hand, I perceive the deceased on the right side. So I have like two places of connection, as if you had a cable going there and a cable going here, two cables. So that's how I managed to distinguish. And also, as I was saying, the communication from the guides comes from above. I feel it higher up, and from the deceased, it's beside me. So for me, they are different frequencies of communication. Even visibly for me, they are like that.
Right. So basically, you feel it very in the physical space, let's say. You feel like the sensation of where they come from in your space.
Yes, I feel the sensation of communication from different places, but I know that both the guides and the deceased, are in the same place, right? But the hook of communication is different.
When you connect through channeling and the guides, do you also feel them as if they were people with a personality, with a form? Or is it more ethereal, and the people or the deceased, let's say, do you feel them more like people and more tangible, like a personality, or how do you see all that?
That's a really good question. Because yes, indeed, I feel the entities of the spiritual world, the guides, more like energies alongside people who generally have interesting wisdom. I mean, quite important because the sensation of their presence is imposing. It's like more luminous, right? More energetically, it's like larger. And deceased people. Indeed, I perceive them more as a personality, a body. It's like a place where that energy is, right? A confined place. In contrast, the other is much larger. So that's also a distinction I could make regarding that.
Okay, basically, you feel people more as people, more connected with their personality and
With personality, indeed. Yes, they have personality.
the guide. Do you see the guides as more neutral in that sense?
Yes, yes, more neutral.
And they connect you.
And like they also tell you like, hey, I need to pass this information sometimes to the clients. I mean, making the distinction there, right? Between the deceased person, the spiritual world guide, and the client on the other side. Sometimes I also have to pass messages to the clients from the guides who share, right? Because not only is there the main guide for each person, but there are a lot of guides on the other side, and sometimes they pass me data like or information for the client derived from the mediumship session.
Does it happen to you that with deceased people you can see more images, more stories in that sense, and with the guides it's more intuitive? It's like there aren't as many images, but you have a certainty about what you need to say.
You do this, I know it, because you're asking very precise questions. Yes, that's how it is. The guide is perceived as as direct intuition. That is, one perceives the information in an isolated way. I can even channel while speaking. So there are moments when I simply let that communication establish itself and I can speak. And I have to step out, of course. I mean, some of what you say sticks with me, but most of it I don't remember because I lose a bit of awareness of what's happening. And on the other hand, of course, with deceased people, the personality is much more present, the information is more concrete, much more physical and visual. For me, it's visual and sometimes auditory. In contrast, with guides, in general, it tends to be direct intuition, more like the ear, but not functioning there.
Yes, look, I don't do channeling, but I only love from what you tell me, it's similar to when I connect in another way, right? When it's not with a deceased person, but you're connecting with another plane, of another order, and it feels different. It's like more direct.
Feels different.
Yes, that's true. Hey, and what is your connection process like? What happens to you when you start to perceive, to connect? How do you experience that?
Something happens to me that I've discovered over time, that all mediums are different, right? We all have different places where we feel the sensations of communication. In my case, I feel it a lot in my neck, as if my hair bothers me down here and back here on the nape. I have a tingling sensation, super interesting. So what happens with that? That's when I realize something is going on. Like that, I mean, or I connect from there and I'm aware that I'm connected when I feel that sensation of connection at the back. And it's as if I had a headband, as if this part expanded. And that's where I feel I connect. And in addition to that, when people who want to communicate arrive, deceased people, generally it happens more with family or friends, because I'm a bit strict about that. So I have this tingling sensation. And I already know something is going on. So I start to raise my little antenna, right? Like the red grasshopper. Just like raising the antenna to from where the communication is coming, and there I manage to detect more or less where it's coming from. And then I can make the connection. So those are like the two most common ways of feeling a connection.
I see, I understand. And does it happen to you suddenly that you connect with at any moment in a certain situation where you're not predisposed to it, like, I don't know, a social situation, for example? Or does it generally happen when you enter that state because you're going to have a mediumistic experience? How do you experience that?
Well, let's see, I'm a bit rigid. So I set boundaries for mediumship, and I think this might be interesting to many people, because sometimes when mediumship starts happening to you and it gets out of control, it's uncomfortable. So I established from the beginning of my ability a fixed structure, which was I don't attend to, so to speak. Spirits that are wandering around on purpose, right? Like if I see or feel that, I tell those on the other side, I say, you know what? I don't do this like that because I need proof. And I need to confirm that what I'm doing is working. So I don't do it if you're just around. If you want us to talk, so to speak, you have to come with someone from your family or someone else who can connect me so I can do it. So with that rule, I've never had many problems with it. And if it appears, I use the same rule. And you know what's I also teach, I'm teaching mediumship now, and I teach the same to the students. And it's interesting because in the end, setting boundaries in mediumship also has to do with setting boundaries in personal life. If you're not good at setting boundaries in your personal life, it's going to be difficult for you as well. So you have to practice. It's very useful to practice the act of setting boundaries.
Yes, I completely agree. The same thing happens to me. Like you set boundaries, and I know other mediums who do the same. So, for example, I had a medium friend who was always connecting. People would come to her house and she would tell them, hey, not in my house. This is not the place. It's like, and it works quite well. I feel they are quite respectful in that regard.
They are generally respectful, yes.
They don't approach me like that either. Rarely do they approach me suddenly like that, but it can happen. Have you noticed over time that the way you perceive things is changing? That when you started, it was one way and now it's another, and it keeps evolving, and suddenly you perceive something in one way or have a sensitivity, and then it seems to change. How do you experience that?
Yes, I've read it in some books too. I've dedicated a lot of time to reading. There is a common narrative among several mediums, myself included, that our ability changes over the years and with practice. So in the first part of my initiation as a medium, well, when I was with you, I was very visual. And I've always been, but I always saw people's houses. It was very strange because my proofs of life were like this. The house, how the person's house was, what they did, what was there, but always inside the house. And that's always like my strong suit. I mean, I carry that. I know it's easy for me and I use it. But now the range of proofs is much broader. And I've also discovered that we mediums have specific areas of ping performance where we are better. There are things, for example, I find it very difficult to give dates, you know. There are mediums who specialize in dates. No, giving dates is not my specialty, you see. Giving dates is not my specialty, but that doesn't mean a session is any less less effective or less good if you don't have that ability as much. That happens to me too, because in the real world, I am very visual. I don't have such a good memory, so remembering names and dates is difficult for me. I use calendars for that, so I don't naturally have that skill developed either. We had a classmate in that course, level 1, who, Ale, she had an impressive memory, and she had many movies in her head. So she would whisper the names with the characters from the movie or the actors. So it was there are mediums who have those skills super developed. So in my case, it's super visual. And also about scenes. I mean, I can compose complete scenes of things, like a video or a photo of something. And that is the most important representation for me within my way of doing mediumship.
Have you received any message that has really marked you at some point, something you can remember? An experience that with a specific message beyond the evidence or how incredible the session might have been that has stayed with you?
They have asked me since I see the other side, well, that is one of the abilities. That's why I call my mediumship spiritual, because it connects the two worlds. And there are people who have asked me, specifically, one person asked me, if God was on the other side, for example, and I said, I'll see what comes up.
Mm.
And the answer was like, God is not a person, but rather a consciousness. And being on the other side, you are aware that you are in the love of God, which is in everything. So it's not a particular person, but rather a state that we are all in when we are in a heavenly state, so to speak, right? Or in the state of the other side. And it was very beautiful because many people think that they're going to be next to God. But if God encompasses everything, it's much broader, much greater than thinking that you, because you go to the other side, are going to connect with that. So it seemed super significant to me because from there I realized that indeed it also has a bit to do with my belief framework. Like it's not in a particular place, but it's always there.
How did your family and friends take the topic of mediumship? When you suddenly came out of the closet and told them you were dedicated to this, or they found out? How did they experience it? What did they say to you?
There's a story about that. Do you remember I told you that my grandfather said he wanted this for me? Well, the first person I told was my mom, and my mom said, she got goosebumps and told me, I believe you completely, and so don't worry. Then I told my dad, well, and my immediate family first. My husband always knew, because his grandfather was a spiritualist. So for him, it wasn't strange, so I didn't have any issues with him because there was really no problem since his grandfather was a spiritualist. He already knew that these things could be done. So with him, I always knew from the moment we met, I was always very straightforward in telling him the whole truth. I told my family later, and then something else happened. Like I finished telling my family, one of my uncles was hospitalized due to COVID. And by that time, I was already practicing mediumship, and he came to see me. I held a mediumship session with the girls from the workshop. We attended with you once a week for 2 years. I practiced a lot. And in some of those sessions every week, I kept getting the same test. So I would say, but this is strange because it wasn't the consultants and it was the same every week and I couldn't connect with anything else. It was during pandemic times and I wrote to one of my cousins and said, hey, I've been stuck with the same story for 3 weeks and something is happening here because I don't understand why this is happening to me. And there I explained to her what I was doing then and why I was doing it. Lala then tells me that the tests she's giving me are from my dad. Okay, we did the session. And from that session, well, she knew that I did it kind of more deeply one day, and after that, something very heavy happened because we did that session, and my uncle passed away the next day. I mean, he had been reaching out to me for 3 weeks. We did the midday session, and he passed away. With that session, my cousin goes because I record all of them, and she shares it with her family, and it was a huge relief for everyone, like receiving one last communication from him. And from there, my cousins, they tell my family, they ask me for permission, and we share what happened. And from there, everyone found out. I mean, from that moment, that's how the other part of my family found out about what I did and who I was. So it was super healing for that part of my family to do this, but it was also very much like a destiny for me to tell them. Because it was impossible not to say it. I mean, with what happened, I couldn't just wash my hands of it and say no. It wasn't me. Impossible. So it's like on the other side, they also show you a path to follow. I mean, this experience for me was like tell it, say it to everyone at once, and accept it. Like open it up, and that's how it was. And from there, my family found out, and from there, I also started doing more public things and saying it publicly.
They took it well from what I see, because there are other people whose families don't take it so well, right? There are even families that worry. They say things like, what's happening to them? Are they going crazy? And that's a good experience you had. It doesn't happen in all cases,
I mean, they helped me a lot. I mean, I know there are people in my family who still don't take it so well, but they are not the majority. And at this point in my life, since I enjoy all the time, we'll see when it becomes something interesting for them to know or not. I mean, everyone is free to believe or trust in these things, or not, and that's perfectly fine. I don't like trying to impose the truth on others. At some point, if it's possible or if the opportunity arises and it happens, we do it. But if not, we don't.
Hey, I was just about to ask you that. How do you handle the experience with very skeptical people? And if this is something you share socially, or is it a topic you usually keep to yourself beyond social media? How do you handle it?
Well, if a person is skeptical, I can explain to them what I do, how I do it, and how those phenomena occur. And I invite them if they want, as it's not my intention to convince them either. There are books about near-death experiences like Anita Moorjani's Dying to Be Me, which is really good because it's a very well-known and powerful NDE. So it's like, if you have any doubts, here you go. Like, this might interest you, but I don't stop discussing it because of that. Later in my public life, I stopped working. I am a teacher by profession. And when I left the place where I worked, I mentioned that I was leaving to dedicate myself, among other things, to this. There were people who told me they were curious, others who were taken aback, right? Because I had never mentioned it before. But from then on, I made it very public. I mean, now I have an Instagram account, I have students, I do this every day. So it would be like denying myself not to share what I do, and people find it very interesting. So it also leads to you sometimes becoming a bit of the center of conversation because everyone wants to know what you do and how you do it and how it connects you. And I think it's nice. It's nice to be able to accept yourself with your ability, to be able to talk about it, for others to learn from your experience or to get involved in this way of seeing the world. Because as I have gotten to know more people who, despite working in spiritual matters, don't know about mediums, being a medium. Now, there are many mediums on Instagram, but I think in public life, it seems they talk little because they are not that well known. So it caught my attention how, when I mention it, others are like, wow, how does it work? And I don't know what. I don't know anyone who does it. So it's also interesting how one puts that on the table because it makes the other person see it as a possibility in life. I mean, there is life beyond life, and there is a person who works in that, connects with it, and has students and operates in that field. So maybe there's a possibility that it's true. Always. So that seems to me, it seems to me that we fulfill a very important social role as well. I mean, for me at least, the fact of working within the realm of departure, death, which is a taboo, and mediums are like a double taboo. So I also find it very beautiful to have the opportunity to talk about that.
Yes, it's interesting to contribute that. At least from my perspective, one doesn't have to convince anyone. Basically, everyone is free. Come to university, believe or not believe, and everyone will have their moment. I always think that way. At the beginning, I kind of tried to convince. I don't know if to convince, but to argue and discuss a bit. I don't do it anymore because sometimes I feel like it's a bit of a waste of time. And of course, if I had to recommend a book, I would recommend Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's The Wheel of Life, which has a lot of information and is by a well-known person with a lot of work, a lot of study, 30 years dedicated to it from the field of medicine. So it's spectacular for the people who see this. Hey.
Here we are, with recommendations as well.
Yes. Tell me something. What do you think about the rise of mediumship on social media and the exposure of mediumistic practice on social media?
Between, as you mentioned at the beginning of this interview, my interest is to transform mediumship into a professional practice. That is to say why, because mediumship has a significant part of craftsmanship. In other words, it is learned through practice. But there are many mediums and there are schools of mediumship in other places, in other countries. In the English-speaking world, there are formal schools of mediumship which offer certifications. So I think that on one hand, this has led me to seek guidance in grief counseling to see how I could continue growing as a medium. And there, I work with a psychologist specializing in grief, Manuel Llana, who has helped me a lot to understand the role we have concerning sensitivity with the bereaved. So, regarding this particular question, my opinion is that mediumship sessions are a private space. Because fundamentally, the bereaved is in a state of high vulnerability. It may be that some bereaved individuals handle it better than others, right? There are bereaved individuals who, for them, no, they are in such a difficult moment and they could perhaps authorize other people to show what is done, which ultimately has as a purpose to demonstrate that the evidence provided proves life after life, right? That's what is sought with that, with making it public. At the same time, I find it an interesting work to show it because it gives other people the opportunity to think that this is possible. So I think in that regard, it seems interesting to me. I don't do it because I highly respect people's privacy. I only have on my account a little video, but actually,
Me too.
it's an experience. I mean, the client within the session, during the session tells me, hey, I want to thank you for this session because I saw, and I did 7 sessions for different family members at different times. So, he says, I saw the 7 sessions and felt like I was communicating with my sister and so on. So that's the only thing I have, which is not the account of the session, but rather the client's account after the session. So I actually don't do it. When I have done public sessions, meaning gathering several people and giving a mediumship session to a group, I always do it with very few people. It's only 10, 12 at best. Why? Because in massive sessions, when there are 30 people you will never manage, one person can't manage, to speak with each of those grieving individuals. So you end up with a debt. In fact, when on some occasions we have done massive sessions and there is someone we can't connect well with, we do the session again separately. So it's also my interest to care about the person you are working with. I understand that not everyone may share my opinion, but I also respect that a lot. I respect grief as a moment in life that changes lives. I mean, grief, what it does is it reboots you. So for me, I respect it a lot. I'm very careful with that. So I try not to show it publicly, at least on social media, not at all.
Yes.
And I don't do sessions on Instagram either. I mean, like going live and giving messages there, because that requires time. And besides, how do you go deeper? That is important to me. There are other people who maybe the sessions that are more based on evidence, which is evidential mediumship, for example. Not all evidential mediums give messages. For me, it's a valid way. I find it okay. As I was saying before, it kind of encourages more people to trust mediumship. But for me, I need depth in the session. So like the message, the understanding of how this session helps in the grieving tasks for the bereaved. So all those things can only be advanced within a session. It's difficult, that's very hard to do. In a more public and exposed situation also, where the other person, if they start crying or things happen to them, they are exposed in that video. So I'm very careful about those things. And because I am also very sensitive. So as a person, as a medium, I feel that I respect those boundaries for myself and for others.
I feel the same way as you. I have, if you look, there are a couple of videos of my sessions at some point, excerpts, and I did it many years ago when I was starting out. And because I had a friend who insisted, upload it, upload it, upload it. Well, I uploaded it, but I always felt reluctant about it because I find that it's an instance too intimate, too deep to make public from my perspective. And then, to put it bluntly, for me, it trivializes such a powerful experience. That's how I see it, at least.
You know what? There, as you say, there's something important. I think that at certain times, Sikmu, not always, but mediumship has also turned into something very public. Like wow, it provided an amazing proof that there is life after life. And that's why I say it contributes in one way, but in another. It's like all mediums had to do the same thing, and we are not all the same. And I think it's also important to say that. For example, in my case, since I see the spiritual world, there are people who find it harder to believe in that, right? They believe in life after life, but they also struggle with the connection to the spiritual world. So, I try to be very careful with these things for that reason, because there are many respectable ways to view mediumship. But I also think it's important to consider what place you want to occupy. And in my case, I want to occupy a place that allows mediumship to be a means of support and contribute to the healing of the mourner's pain. So at that point, the approach is different.
Yes, I completely agree. And what do you think about, since you mentioned it, people who do what they call evidential mediumship, in quotes, and only provide data, but there's no message behind it? What do you think about that?
As I was saying before, I think I have nothing against it. But I do believe that because it's an opportunity that allows very skeptical people, for example, to start trusting. And I think that's valuable. I mean, giving yourself the chance to say, no, I don't believe in this matter. I'm going to try something to see if it works. And then they give you plenty of evidence and you say, yes, I actually realized that there is life after life. I think at that point it's very valuable. But there are other things that can't be achieved if that's your perspective. So what is my invitation as well? To those who need a lot of proof and want to believe that this is possible, have an evidential mediumship session, there's no problem. If you want to understand the depth, understand what's happening with your loved ones on the other side, how it has also impacted them in their relationship with you on this side, if you want to deepen that understanding, have a session of other types of mediumship. Because evidential mediumship primarily does that. Now, there are some mediums who do give messages, and I think that's good. I think it's good that this possibility exists. But as I tell you, I wouldn't say it's completely good or completely bad, but I would suggest that people make a decision. But also by informing themselves, because that's the other thing. There isn't much information, so we are all mediums. And there are some who say, I am an evidential medium, and that gives you a direction, right? I say, I am a spiritual medium, I see heaven, so that gives you another direction. So I think it's also important, especially if someone is watching this video, to try to do that, like understanding the person you're going to connect with, the one who will be your connection cable. Who are they? Who is that person? What is behind it? I understand that at first you like, wow, you might not be into it, but maybe you've already had a session and want to try to see more things. You look for other forms of mediumship. There are several. So I think it's also important to give yourself this task if you want to delve deeper.
Yes, I also think that mediumship is very open. There are many types of mediums, basically. Now, what caused me a bit of conflict, is that for me, the purpose of mediumship is to connect with those from beyond so they can communicate with those here. And I believe the most important thing is the message. Before, you see, I used to think differently because I had certain preconceptions and them was about myself and my own abilities. But when you realize that there's always something to say, I used to be so rigid that I would say, no, but how am I going to say this if I have no way to verify it? Like something that had to do with a deeper message that stirred things that need to be said. And ultimately, that is the essence of mediumship. I prefer in a session to have 90% be a message that reaches and resonates with people, and 10% be evidence with 2 or 3 strong ones. That's it. And often, the evidence is within the message itself. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, and I don't think people are going to come from the beyond to say, hey, yesterday you changed your shoes. Hey, I don't know, you didn't shower today. Things that are irrelevant. And I get the feeling that what's happening there is that people think they are mediums, but they are not mediums. They are just connecting from the psychic field, doing a field reading. That's what happens with field reading.
There are people who might think that, yes.
I mean, that's what I believe because like now, in a medium training, everyone comes out as a medium. When in truth, mediumship to me is something super, super rare. So that's what I believe, but basically.
But look, there's also a way to view the session, right? There's like, I was reading a book recently by someone from the United States. I can't remember the name now, but she talked about an iceberg within the mediumship session, right? As a test. So there are things that are above and things that are below. And the things that are above allow you to connect with the people, with the things that are below. So the proofs of life, which are what is above, they have a message or absolutely relevant information to give. But if you don't give that opportunity to the proof to speak to you and communicate its depth, you're only seeing the surface. It's what you say. So that's why I tell you, there are schools of mediumship not only in Chile, in other places, that work a lot with proof of life, like age, name, where they lived, almost the address. I have seen quite impressive things.
To me, it's nonsense.
But the truth is that, of course, how that builds a relational framework between the medium and the spiritual person, so to speak, the deceased person. For what? Why? And there it comes in. What? And we also talked about that with Manuel, like in the workshop I did on mediumship and grief support. It was called a compassionate approach, but basically, it had that purpose of understanding what the tasks of grief are. And among the tasks of grief, we discovered there through conversation that essentially, many of the clients come for that to heal. So a proof of life, I don't know if it can support everything that the client comes to seek as a personal process of dealing with grief. So we realized, talking with other mediums in that workshop, that indeed many of the bereaved come for tasks related to grief. So there is an interesting task there.
I would say the majority.
Yes, and where this ability to help essentially comes into play. And that's what I would most like to start hearing, how mediums also become part of people's healing processes around grief.
So do you think that mediumship is definitely a therapeutic healing tool, basically?
Yes, it's a tool, not a therapy. Of course, a distinction must be made because we conduct a session, Theo, and there the knots are untied and it helps. But we are not therapists. That's important to mention as well.
Is there any experience as a medium that you've had which was impactful for you that you could share with us, that broke paradigms for you, made you question yourself, or perhaps destroyed belief systems you previously had, that impacted you in such a way that it left you pondering?
There are several, but one that has done a lot for me, an experience that did a lot for me, I channel for my birthday. I listen to the guides and write in a notebook. I do automatic writing. But with the computer, I listen to the dictation and type. And for one of my birthdays, I get the notice that I'm going to start taking steps to do a kind of rescue day, which is like helping people who are stuck between planes. So I was like, what am I going to do here? I mean, I have no idea. And a month later, I got a case. And that was like the first time I did this, and it was quite impressive because in that session, I felt trapped in the client's house because the client's mother lived there and I couldn't leave the house. I described the house perfectly, everything with an impressive level of detail, but I couldn't leave the house. So I said, okay, if they told me from the other side that I would have to do this, this person is in the house. And I asked the family, have you felt like things are falling in like pictures? Have you dreamed or felt that this other person is not doing well? Have you dreamed of them? Have you seen them asking for help? I don't know. Yes. Everything was like that. Pictures would fall, lights would turn on. One of the daughters had dreamed that things were not okay. I mean, all the indicators of things to fix were there. And I said, okay, it's my turn. And there, we did a session of steps that I later teach, but at that moment, I didn't know what I was doing. I followed the guide's instructions to do it.
It just happened.
I simply did it. Yes, I did it. They came to me and said, do this. And I kept doing everything they told me. And I see the step, I see how the person ascends, to sum it up. And when I see that, I said, wow, and how am I going to verify this? I mean, I can think that I did it, but how am I going to see if this actually happened on my own? So we asked the other side to let us know if this was accomplished. So I could understand and know that we had done it. And a month later, the client calls me and says, you know what? My cousin just called me saying she dreamed about my mom and told me she saw her on the other side. And that she was fine, and to let us know that she was okay and not to worry about her because she was going to continue on her path. And I was like, okay, bye. I said, I did it. I mean, I don't know how I did it. They taught me how to do it that time. And from then on, more and more people started coming to me with these kinds of cases. And it also marked a before and after for me, because from that point on, I received so many cases. As they told me I would dedicate myself to this, that I learned how to do it. And now I can teach it. So it's super transformative and it's impressive because with the students we do massive steps. I mean, in several of us help a person pass through. And the students see many similar things. Everyone sees the process in different ways, but it's the same. There are some who have even seen I use certain tools to do some things, and they have seen the tools I use even though I haven't told them about it. I mean, some impressive things happen. And that's how I learned that it could be done. And how it was done. And also, how they appreciated it on the other side. And then, having sessions without me knowing as well. A different family member comes to ask me for a session for that person we passed, and I see them on the other side and do a different type of session. So those kinds of things are magical. It's like, how would you explain the life of a medium? Well, magic. 80% of your life is pure magic.
That's right.
Because you are periodically recognizing information from the other side in your own life, whether from the spiritual world or as a channeler or from deceased people. So it's like you learn a language. That is of life. Here we are not talking about me entering a mediumship session and that. No, it's about broadening your perspective on how the world works in this reality, with this reality, right? So I think that experience was very transformative for me. And it has continued to be so over the years.
That's right. I have always thought that mediums have the ability of mediumship, but they have many other potentials that they could eventually deepen and start to incorporate into their lives. I mean, I say it from personal experience. Now, for example, there's a nuance in what happens to you compared to what happens to me. You generally, for instance, when you don't know something and start to understand how to do it, you receive it from guides. For me, it happens that I receive it from no one. In quotes, like suddenly I start to understand it, and before I was very rigid, so I would limit myself and close off, and I wouldn't approach topics. And suddenly now I'm more open, and I say, okay, I'm going to do what comes naturally, what I feel I have to do, and that's almost infallible. Recently, it happened with a person who came for a mediumship session. I'm always scheduled for sessions to connect with someone deceased, and they told me, no, I don't. I don't want to connect with anyone deceased. I have like a mess in my life, and I want to see if you can guide me. And before I would say, no, you know what? I don't do that. I don't specialize in that. And I said, well, let's try. Let's see what happens. Then I started to speak and began to feel up on what I needed to tell them. And I started talking about their life and the phases of their life and the cycles of their life. And with the date, I mean, at 9 years old. But no, this wasn't at 9. It was at 7 because you have 9-year cycles. I don't remember well, but it was fitting. And it's impressive, impressive, impressive. How one flows when one has the ability to open up with good intention and start saying what one perceives. I don't feel like a guide is telling me, but rather it's like accessing a bank of information. That's how I feel it. And let's say, hey,
It's true.
do you think that anyone can connect with the deceased, with people who have passed away? Can everyone do it?
I think that, we all come with this ability innately. Everyone, I don't know. We couldn't say with a little child. If they perceived it from a young age, right? But I think so. Well, there's also an important thing there. We all come and go from the source. When my daughter was born, for example, I experienced during the birth that my husband's grandfather came to deliver her to me. It was very strange because I had a mediumship session during the birth. A crazy thing. And it turns out he arrives and gives me proof of life to show me that it's him. I already know it's him, but I told my husband some things and said, look, this. Yes. Okay, this is flight. I ready. 1, 2, 3. And then it was like he tells me that he brings our daughter and he gave me information about him, the girl, and, well, everything that was going to happen with her. Like things about her personality. So I don't really remember what happened because I was so in the zone and plugged in like in another world that it's my husband remembers very, very little. He has been telling me what happened that day. But at the same time, then if children come from the other side, why can't they bring that memory, right? There are children today, more and more, who are being born remembering things from their past lives or who have a connection with loved ones who have passed away. The only thing I would say happens is that we disconnect from that information because sometimes we can't handle it, like living in two worlds. And also, from the older generations, which I include myself in, it was sometimes very difficult for us to communicate how we felt about it or to be able to talk about these things freely. So I think many children have blocked it. Many people who are 60 years old, 50 years old, come to study with me and they tell me, all my life these things happened to me, but I couldn't talk about them with anyone. I couldn't tell anyone. But here I feel like I've reached a safe harbor. So I think that I would say the opposite. I would say that we all have the potential. But if we behave as adults with children in a way that completely shuts that down, of course, we will have people who will say, no, not everyone can develop this ability. But if we start living more openly, I believe this will begin to grow.
Okay. Do you think that
I would rather turn the situation around, right?
all people are potential mediums?
Yes, I believe that all people are potential mediums.
Look, in that sense, I disagree with you. No, because I think that mediumship is like, I believe that one is born a medium. I used to say to you, no, I started perceiving at 30, but that's not true. I mean, I started perceiving from that perspective as if I was being prepared, right? Like with tests but I had experiences since I was a child. I mean, I heard people talking basically and a lot of things. But notice that with all the mediums I know who are mediums, who have experience in that sense, all have had experiences since they were children. It's something very common. I believe that some people come with an innate ability, like any other person. Yeah, you see?
Like anything else, right? Mathematics, they have more skill in mathematics.
Exactly. I think it's like in a skill that comes with it. You're born with it.
I mean, that's why I think we are all born quite open. And then it starts to close. It gets organized according to what each person gives space to or not. That's my feeling. I also tell you this because people have come to me, like to study, but I have a clause there. Like, you have to trust in the spiritual world, because if not, it won't. Since I work from there, it's very difficult for me to teach you. So yes, there is that clause. And from the experiences I've had with that clause, well, look, of course, there are people who achieve a greater or lesser level of communication. There are people who have a spark, and I say if you keep practicing, you'll achieve it, and others who do it very quickly. So, of course, it also depends on that, as you say, on how much skill the person has. There are people who have much more skill than others. And if you are naturally intuitive, it comes to you very quickly. I mean, even if you are intuitive about something else, like life, you can also quickly catch on and do it. So I work with that group of people, those who are at least intuitive.
What do you think, or what do you believe happens after we die, after death? From your perspective as a medium, what happens to us?
I've experienced it differently because since I work as a channeler, I've seen the process of dying. So it happened to me that when I read Anita Borgni's book, I said, well, I've seen this. I mean, I've been there with people. I've had to, I've been there to accompany people at the end of life. And I've seen how the guardian angel, the main guide, arrives, how family members come. I mean, I've seen that. I saw it. I witnessed it. And how the life review begins. If the person, for example, goes through a period of illness and then is already at the end of life, kind of drowsy, right? It's like that. It happens, they lose consciousness. There, I've also seen, I mean, how the life review takes place. So if you ask me how I see it because what I can tell you is what I've experienced. And what I've experienced is that there are many processes that, in fact, I've seen happen that way. I mean, that they come to get us, that a space of light opens up for us during the transition, that the transition is a process. So it's not like we go straight to heaven instantly. It doesn't work that quickly. But that door, that channel of transition does open up, just like when we are born. In other words, there's a birth canal and there's also an exit channel. And when we are on the other side, we are received by our loved ones, entities from the spiritual world. And depending on the condition in which we pass, death is a state of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if you refuse to die, certain things happen. If you are emotionally or mentally unwell when you depart, other things happen. And if you go completely to the other side and surrender yourself to it, yet other things happen. But in none of the three cases, no, or at some point you don't find the way to the light. I mean, we are all accompanied. So I think that's also important. There are rockier paths on the other side. There are freer, more open paths on the other side, but there are always paths.
I have the impression that there is like a stage in the first phase where a kind of illusion is created, because there is still a kind of residue from your emotional and mental body. So you start to build a reality that's like being inside a dream, but you don't know that you're dreaming. And depending on how you left, that dream can be really pleasant or it can be heavier, right? But at some point you become aware that you're living that experience, and that's when you sort of change states. That's why it's so important for people to leave peacefully, to leave calmly, and to be accompanied. Also, every day I'm more convinced that it's just as important for many people to have support after they've passed, like the accompaniment from their loved ones, for them to think of them with yes, for them to wish them well, to send them good energy. I think that's very important for these processes.
Yes, and I would add to what you mentioned, like I always say, do a novena. It doesn't matter if it's not Catholic, but pray for 9 days or be there for that person. Give them love, give them Reiki, whatever you want. But remember her with a lot of affection. And the other thing I also like to do is to ask for spiritual support from our loved ones who have already passed away, Mona, to have them accompany her. Tell them, hey, you who are already on the other side, be with her through this process she has to go through. So I would add that, like these two components, right? But yes, that's the foundation, and it's super important for them. That transition, I mean, besides the state in which they make that transition, how we, the ones who stay here, can accompany them is also important.
Absolutely.
That also helps, it adds up.
Hey, why do you think there are spirits that can communicate and others that don't? Do you have any idea about that?
Look, in my experience, the following started to happen. People came to me I have a very specific case. A person came to see me, a medium who was practicing. She had been practicing a lot for 2 years. And she says to me, you know what? There's a person I've done sessions for, me and other people, and we just can't connect. I look at the person's photo and I tell her, it's just that this person isn't where they should be. And from there, we followed a path together, pardon, until she finally found them and was able to connect. And that's where I have something to say about this. And it's that for people who pass away, it also depends on their emotional and mental state, where they go, and that's why sometimes it's longer or shorter. There are some mediums who naturally connect with people who are in higher states of transition. It's easier to do a session with someone who has already completed their transition, who is up there, who is well. And there are others for whom communication is more difficult when the person is in other states. They haven't yet developed the tools to make that kind of contact since it's different. And also, there's another important factor. When you refuse to feel the emotions of the person who passed away, you close a door to being able to understand where they are and how they're doing. So sometimes I think that's one aspect. What? Being aware enough to realize that there's not just one place where people go, that these things can happen in between. That's one part of it. Second thing, I've had cases where I haven't been able to communicate because they're in spiritual hospitals, literally. For example, I was trying to communicate with an uncle who passed away, and they told me, they kept saying, no, the door is still at the hospital. No, it's not possible. Like, wait, you can't communicate with this person, forget it? And they would close the door on me, you know? I said, no. And it was 3 months of waiting. Until one day, he just appeared to me and said, okay, I'm fine now. You can talk to me. 3 months later. And in another case, it was 4 months later. Then there was another case where I also couldn't communicate, and I asked for help. I said, hey, but where is this person? Why can't I talk to her? And they tell me from the other side, like, look, what's happening is that this person is in reflection. She was praying. So they tell me, like, she's in a temple and you can't communicate with her right now. She's busy with something else, so it's just not possible. So I have those 3 cases that are very clear to me. And another day, it also happened that the family came to me to talk about their mother. And they also told me, like, we went to another medium and that person couldn't connect with my mother. I said, let me see what I can do. And of course, the person, she was very confused. So her own state of confusion didn't allow the other person to understand her. So of course, she didn't really give much evidence or anything because she was confused. When I realized that she was confused, and I was able to help her with her confusion, we were able to communicate. So I would say there are a variety of reasons. Now, I'm not infallible. I mean, I've also had cases where I haven't been able to communicate. It's happened to me, yes. But I've also had these other cases where it also depends on the medium's ability and the medium's personality and whether those on the other side want to connect or not. So I don't know. There's not just one reason I could give you for why they can't connect. I've had these experiences and also sessions where I haven't been able to connect as well.
You know, once I spoke with the director of a spiritist center, like the biggest one here in Chile, and I brought this up to him. I know him, he's a friend, Osman. I said to him, "Hey, Osman, how do you explain that I never get people who are in that wandering state, lost, like they don't understand anything, while you all dedicate yourselves entirely to assisting those people?" And do you know what he told me? He said, "Well, I imagine that you don't connect in every session, right?" No, I don't. That's true. Well, he said, the spiritual world is very wise and will send people where they need to be sent, where they can be helped, where they can be managed. Certain people will be sent to you, and the ones we can handle, the ones we're specialists in, are sent to us. I thought, that was a pretty coherent answer.
It's a wonderful answer because that's exactly how it is. And I've discovered the same thing in my own practice. And you know what I think is important? That there are mediums who say, yeah, in my experience, I haven't seen people not transition. And that's not right, because that just doesn't happen to them. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen, that it doesn't happen.
Exactly. Do you think destiny is predetermined, only that we have a set date to arrive and a specific date to depart? How do you think that works?
Right. Also, from my experience, yes, of course. Yes. Look, death is a process, it's not a particular day. So we are periodically kind of updating our database, right? It's like that's what we do. And I do think we come with a set amount of time, more or less. Like we come with a return date, like a ticket that has a return date, but you can change it, I've experienced that with some people who have passed away. I think they're going to die, and then when I see them in the process depart, I say, wow, this person extended this thing. I don't know what they did, but it's like they prolonged death. They're not going to die now. They're going to die months later, like 6 months later. So it's like you can always ask for an extension. And that's interesting because I've noticed that from experience. And I think in a book by Michael Newton, it also appears that there are people who kind of modify certain things. Now it's not like you can change it by 10 years. If you change it by 10 years, it's because there's a life change. I mean, it's like you had a near-death experience to realize something. You managed to understand that, and that gives you another life. But I haven't really seen cases where someone postpones their death by that much if it were at another time or in another way. And there also has to be a change so that one sees the opportunity, the difficulty, as an opportunity. But that's how I've seen it, like in some cases I've read about. And what I have witnessed is modifications in the timing, that for sure.
What would you say to someone who has this sensitivity, who has always had it but doesn't want to dedicate themselves to mediumship, doesn't want to be a medium or anything, but has this sensitivity and sometimes finds it hard to cope with? For example, what would you say to someone in that situation?
I know many people who are afraid of mediumship, and I think we have a bad reputation because in the sense that like mediums, this thing we say about being a spiritist, right, which is not the same, because at its core, the spiritist movement has a permanent spiritual belief behind it and involves emotional, psychological, and energetic development related to that. So we don't just go around connecting with any spirit that's out there. I think it's really important to say that. And we've also talked about boundaries, right? I understand that some people don't want to dedicate themselves to being a medium, and that's perfectly fine. But I do think that if you have a sensitivity, the path of personal development that allows you to connect with your way of perceiving and to develop, it is a path full of discovery and a lot of magic. I think rather, I wouldn't deny myself the opportunity to try living this way of walking through life, even if maybe it's not always comfortable. For now, you can find tools to cope with it in other ways. There are always ways. Okay? But I think that, and you know what? It also happens to me that in my case, I think that denying the ability you have is denying yourself. I don't want to deny myself. I don't want to deny myself the opportunity to be who I am. And this is part of who I am. You and I am too. So accepting ourselves and wanting to take something from this path, maybe not everything, but understanding it a bit more, also broadens our perception of ourselves and opens up a very, very important path of self-discovery and personal growth. I mean, the perspective I have on life now, after years of being a medium And the things I care about today, like connecting with others, building relationships, and creating beautiful moments to share with my family, all of that has come from my mediumship. If I weren't so aware that death is always present and that every moment we cultivate is in moment we'll treasure once we're gone, my life would be different. So I think we shouldn't deny ourselves the possibilities that this brings us. Now, if someone has difficulties with this, it can be organized. It can be managed. Something can be done. There's always a way.
Based on your experience as a medium, what do you think would be the message that sums up what those on the other side would want to tell those of us who are still here?
This plane is an experience. To the extent that we want to experience it and allow ourselves to do so, we start discovering who we are and what we truly have inside. The more you allow yourself to be you, the more you allow yourself to reach what you truly want from your heart. It might sound cliche, but what your soul really wants, the more you find a path toward yourself. And there is no other path, but yourself, with the mistakes and with the good and bad things you do. Because when you reach the other side, you also look at yourself and see what you were able to learn, what you weren't. And you also learn from others. So if we allow ourselves to learn, we will learn. And those on the other side of us will learn as well. So to the extent that your path is freer, that your path allows you to do more things within the possibilities you have, but you can always choose, you can go. So I think that, I find it of immeasurable beauty that we can contribute to the development of those who have already passed on. They show it to me, They tell me things like, hey, my granddaughter is now doing something I never did, and as I watch her do it, I understand so many new things. Like I managed to change my perspective on this. I find it very valuable that this person is doing this. So how do they learn from us as well? It is of immeasurable value for everyone, for those over there, for us here, and for our families as well, for our soul family too.
If you had to sum up what you do in a single phrase, now how would you summarize it?
We are always connected to everything. We are always connected to others. We are always connected to who we truly are. And the possibility of discovering ourselves is always within us. What I do is simply be a communicator, a messenger of that which we all have, and of that communication that we all share all the time. I'm simply a messenger of that.
Rosario, and to wrap up, how can people who are watching this video get in touch with you or learn more about you?
For now, I'm on Instagram on the low script. Path to our soul, all together, one soul. And Rosario Motecinos is my name, so if you search for my name on Instagram, you'll find me there as well. That's it for now, and I'm also on El Cuadrado. El Cuadrado is an appointment booking system for mediumship. So if you look for me there, you'll also find me.
That's great.
So that's it.
Rosario, thank you so much for sharing with us in the 11th episode of Outside the Matrix of the Invisible. So I hope we see each other again next time.
Thank you very much, Esteban. Take care, and we're always in touch.
And to everyone else who has watched this video, thank you for making it this far. And as I always say, if you liked it, share it, give it a like, and that way we can reach many more people. All your comments are always welcome and will be answered by us. See you in the next episode.